All right, so yeah, it's been a while since we spoke, huh?
Yeah, it's been a couple of years now.
Yeah, I believe so. No, I guess a lot has happened in the world, and a lot has happened with your band as well. So now you have a new album out, "The Age of Misinformation," and it's basically a concept album. Do you want to talk a bit about the concept and what was going on that led you into that concept?
Yeah, so this is our fourth album, came out earlier this month of January, and it's actually been in the works for a little bit longer than some of our other albums, but the pandemic sort of delayed a lot of things. But yeah, the concept of this album is, as you mentioned, the title about misinformation, specifically about lies versus truth, and how the first half of the album is about how these lies and misinformation tear people apart, both with the sort of the socio-political impact of it as well as on a personal level. And then the second half of the album is exploring where do we go from here? How can we find truth and how can we find peace of mind? So, yeah, there was definitely a concept behind this and something I'd wanted to do for a long time with one of our albums is have a concept like this.
Okay, so what have you come up with as far as where we're going? I mean, I listened to it again today. Um, I yeah, you know, like I said, I'll edit this. So this is my first one back in a long time. So
No
basically,
worries.
yeah. Um, so I mean, there's been a lot going on, obviously, in the world, and you mentioned the pandemic. What influence did that have on the band? As far as I noticed, it's a different lineup.
Yeah, the lineups that we've had in the past definitely do have an impact on the sound of the albums. But as you mentioned, the pandemic certainly did with this album. With previous Aaron Clift experiment albums, when we had put together songs, typically the way we had done it was I would come up with ideas for a song, and I might take my phone out and bang around on my keyboard and just record myself singing with the phone and maybe put together a chord chart, and then I'd present that to my band in rehearsal and we would arrange it there, and we would do those kinds of very rough rehearsal recordings, and then we'd head into the studio. So it's almost like we would cut our teeth on it live as a band, and then we'd go into the studio and knock it out. But one of the I guess one of the things I wanted to do differently with this album is I wanted to take a more I guess a more conscious approach with production choices, because I think when you do an approach like we did before, you do get a lot of the energy of the band, but then a lot of the decisions for production and arranging are made in the studio. So uh, sometimes when you make those on the fly, they can be good decisions. Other times it's one of those things where you listen back to it later and you're like, maybe if I had done it this way, it could have been a little bit better or something like that. So I already wanted to make a more conscious approach with how we approached our production and the pre-production of this album. And the pandemic sort of made it a necessity anyway, because we had just auditioned Anthony Bassini, our guitarist, in February 2020. And we told him, all right, we'll give you a couple of weeks. And after South by Southwest Music Festival, we want to start playing live shows again. And we would like to be ready for that. So South by Southwest got canceled that year. And then the lockdown notices started happening shortly after that. And we figured, well, we'll reconvene in April, in a month when things calm down. Well, they
Yeah,
didn't calm down. They actually got worse.
yeah.
And then that 1 month turned into 2 months, turned into 3 months, et cetera. And we realized at some point in May that this was going to be a more permanent type of situation. So I had already been looking into ways that I could use Ableton Live. I had already been using it for live concert with my keyboard stuff, but I hadn't really explored the production recording capabilities of it. So having this situation now where I couldn't meet in person with my bandmates made it even more necessary to do that approach. So what I ended up doing was arranging a lot of the songs more in depth. So I would record ideas on the keyboard. Sometimes it would just be keyboard parts. Sometimes I would have a bass guitar and a drum part, and I'd program the loops for that and put that together. I'd send the recordings out to my bandmates and say, all right, here's the arrangement. And now I'd like for you to record a part that's like similar to this, but it can be, more of your performance.
Yeah.
We would do that. They would send me their parts. I would assemble them back together in Ableton. Then we would meet on Zoom every week, and we'd go through and discuss these songs, and we'd be able to discuss the arrangements in real time. That was a substitute for rehearsal. But what it ended up doing was, by the time we did get back together in August 2021 and rehearse these songs, I was a little bit concerned about, well, is this going to sound organic or is it going to sound like stitched together? As it happened, when we got together, we didn't miss a beat. Because we had done so much pre-production, we knew what parts we needed to play, and it was really easy then going into the studio and knowing, okay, well, this goes here, this layer goes here, and then we could focus more on the performances themselves, like just getting the best possible performances and tweaking certain sounds here and there, but not having to make a lot of arrangement decisions in the studio where you're paying by the hour and having to deal with all those things. So yeah, that's a long way of saying, yes, the pandemic did definitely influence the direction of this album.
No, it's interesting. I mean, it sounds like you kind of made the best out of a bad situation as far as, the way you were going back and forth and you put the pieces together. But then when the time came, you actually did it more organically instead of long distance.
Yeah, and I think doing it this way, I felt like with this album that being the producer for this album and making a lot of those decisions forced me to really think deeply about what kind of sound we were going for. A lot of decisions like that were ones that I either didn't have enough experience with like the first two albums, or that I was not as involved with our third album. I think with this one, that plus the concept of this album, I think really helped glue together these songs into a more cohesive work. Even though we wanted to keep a lot of the things that we did with previous albums that we liked, the stylistic diversity, the high quality musicianship, and I think with all those extra things, I really mean this when I say I think it's our best album to date.
Yeah, it's definitely. Yeah, you mentioned diversity, and that's something else I wanted to talk about. That there's really a lot of different looks on this album. I mean, you have big band stuff, you have some more acoustic sounding stuff, you have, maybe some more traditional progressive rock sounding things. So was that just by, the muses, or um, like I said, I mean, there's many different sounds on the album.
Yeah, some of that was intentional, but a lot of it was me just exploring different ways of songwriting. I have a lot of different approaches that I like to use to just come up with ideas and find inspiration. Sometimes it'll start with a keyboard sound that I really like that I've never used before. I upgraded my computer at the end of 2019, which is around when I started writing these songs, and I upgraded Ableton, and I also upgraded the plugins that I was using for my keyboard sounds. So I use Complete by Native Instruments. Before, I had been using Contact, which was like the stripped down version of it. So I had the typical Prog Warhorse keyboard sounds. You got your pianos, your Hammond organs, your Moog
Mhm.
synthesizers, that kind of stuff. But
Mellotron.
yeah, Mellotron, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
My background is in classical music, so and viola was my first instrument. So I really love what I love about classical music is its sort of expansive thinking and diversity of sound. And to me, the symphony orchestra, if I can find a way to capture that with electronic sounds, I really enjoy that. So some of the sounds, some of the songs that you hear on the album were inspired by different keyboard patches that I found that I'm like, wow, that sounds cool. I want to use that somewhere. And then learning how to play that sound and hearing the qualities of that instrument kind of informed the writing for that. Then there's other times where I might have just a lyric or like a little snippet of a melody in my head, and then that forms the basis for a song. Um, for the title track of the album, it was actually the title of the song that I started with. I wrote that one in the summer of 2020, and by that point, the pandemic had been raging for half the year. There was a lot of political unrest going on all over the world, and every day I'm reading something in the newspaper or online in social media that just would upset me, and seeing all the misinformation that was flying around made me think about, man, it seems like we're in an age of misinformation. And I thought, man, that would be a great title for a song. And so I wrote about that subject, and then that in turn became, when I finished writing that song, I looked back at some of the other songs I wrote, and I saw, oh well, I wrote Liar and I wrote Bet on Zero, and those both had these
Mhm.
themes of deception. And I thought this could actually be a good concept for an album that I want to explore. So then that in turn helped me with kind of still being stylistically diverse with the music, but still having something to kind of glue everything together.
Yeah. So then you come up with stuff like Dark Secrets, and yeah, and then it all just kind of starts to hang together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you mentioned classical, and I thought it was interesting that this album does actually have some real string instruments, not keyboard patches. There's actually a string quartet, correct?
Yes, on The Color of Flight and Malaga. And yeah, it was a lot of fun working with them. I always tell people that string writing for strings is kind of my comfort zone because I spent so many years in orchestra. Writing for brass is something that was relatively new to me. I'd done a little bit of orchestral writing when I was doing classical composing, but uh, for Bet on Zero, we have a brass band in
Right.
there,
Yeah, I was
and
going to mention that. Yeah, that was definitely struck me as wow. That was a way different sound than anything I'd ever heard out of you. Yeah.
yeah, it's I like to give myself new challenges, and so when I think about this album, I um, I did make a conscious effort to try some things that I hadn't done before. So Bet on Zero was one of them for me. I had always wanted to do something that was a little bit more jazz oriented, and as it happened, I had this riff, the bass riff in the song that I was working on, and that that bass riff came first, and then I developed a vocal around it. And I thought it sounded kind of bluesy, kind of jazzy. I presented it to my band, and our drummer at the time, Chase, he listened to it and he said, I'm also percussionist in Big Wise Brass Band, and if you showed that to them, I bet they would love to work with you. And so I went to Will Wright, who is the trombonist, soloist on that song, and also the leader of the group. And I told him that I wanted to do something with them and I wanted to do something jazz oriented. And he was totally on board. And he said that it would be a lot of fun. So I asked him, what's the instrumentation here? He said, we've got three trumpet players. You could do two trombones. And he recommended alto and baritone sax. So there's your seven-piece brass ensemble. I started with the bass and vocals and then a little bit of the drums, and then we filled in the sound with that brass band. And uh, so for the Color of Flight in Malaga, it was kind of a similar thing with starting with, in the case of those two, I started with a lot of keyboard sounds and then let the strings kind of fill in the gaps in that sound.
Yeah, it definitely caught my ears. This is definitely something different from you guys that I hadn't heard before. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about who's in the band at this point and how they influenced it and how you met up with them? I mean, it seems like, yeah, there's no one from your previous album, basically, is there?
No, this was a totally new lineup. I met through a couple. Cliff Warren, I known him through another group in Austin, Proud Peasant. We had done some shows with them, and he had worked with them. He when he knew that we needed a bass player, he got in touch with me and joined us in 2019. Anthony Bassini, I think he found me on Craigslist, I want to say, and then and then Pablo, I know I found him through a Facebook music group. So just a lot of networking. But what I like about this lineup, besides the fact that they're all fantastic musicians, is the backgrounds that we come from are all kind of different. You know, I come from a classical and rock and progressive rock background. Anthony comes from singer songwriter and jazz background. He studied at Berklee College of Music, did songwriting. Cliff comes from he's really into a lot of classic metal. He played in a lot of metal bands before, as well as progressive rock and rock bands. And then Pablo, our drummer and percussionist, comes from sort of a Latin and jazz background. So I guess there's a good stylistic mix in there, but we all have in common an interest in adventurous music and trying out stuff that is a bit unconventional.
Yeah, I was particularly impressed by Anthony. I have to say, and you say his background was. I'm sorry. What did you say his background was? Because
He actually has a solo album coming out soon. His stuff is I'm trying to think how I describe some of it kind of reminds me a little bit of like John Mayer or like Dave Matthews, but he's a singer-songwriter, but he also has a love for like Coheed and Cambria and Rush and some more shred guitar.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The singer-songwriter thing, and then some of his playing just sounded a lot more like what you just said, more like maybe shred, like Rush.
Yeah. I liked working with him because for The Color of Flight, I remember that was actually the first song. I worked on that way back in the beginning of 2019, although the original idea for that was like from 2016 or 17. But I had kind of tossed around this chord progression and some stuff, and it just wasn't, the arrangement wasn't working out. I had too many lyrics, too many sections to the song that didn't feel cohesive, and I also was like, something about this arrangement just doesn't work right for me. And he's like, let me listen to that. And a week later, he brought it back. He slowed the tempo down dramatically, and he turned it into more of an acoustic, gentle acoustic guitar for the foundation of it. I'm like,
yeah.
And then he just cut all the lyrics except for the two lines that are in there. And I was like, that's it. That's what it needed. He had a good ear for that. And then with Rise, he brought that in as a guitar idea, and I worked on the chord progression with him to kind of nail down a more stable progression that I could sing over. And although I would say that chord progression is anything but stable, but we figured out something that worked for us. And so I liked having that collaborative energy to kind of help with some of the songwriting in this album.
Yeah, so I was like I said, it really struck me. I don't think I had heard acoustic guitar on any of your stuff before, and that one, as soon as it came on, it kind of caught my ear. And so you're were you saying that it started off as more like a keyboard, and then he took it and arranged it for guitar?
It was more like it started out. I had it with keyboards, just a one sound with keyboards, but the tempo was much faster, and by that point, I was like, we already have a bunch of fast tempo songs on this album. See, I think with previous Aaron Clift experiment albums, especially the first two, we had too much slow stuff. Then with this album, I was like, no, now we have too many fast songs, and I think he caught wind of that and was like, this could actually work better as a slower piece. And he gave it to me with the acoustic guitar patterns, and like, okay, now that it's simplified, what can we do to expand the sound and keep it interesting? Because if it's just like, the same guitar pattern through the whole song,
Mhm.
that could get boring unless it's like 2 minutes long. And then that was where I was like, maybe we could do something where the sound kind of expands through just different sound design textures. I had been listening to Mike Oldfield's work Omadon. I'm a huge fan of that, and I like how that he does this with a lot of his pieces. And I think Tubular Bells is the most well known, but I think Omadon is his best. I just love how that one morphs from, in different textures, and the classical person in me appreciates that. And I thought a lot about also film soundtracks that I'd heard, and how um, how just having changes in orchestration and texture and subtle harmonic changes could take a person on a journey, even if there aren't that many lyrics.
I think it was very effective, I would have to say. Um, so you had your producer and arranger hat on quite a bit then.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, good. It seems as though you so this was your first time as producer, correct?
I had done uh, I had done a little bit of input on previous Aaron Clift experiment albums, but I wouldn't say that I was really producing them. More like just explaining to the producer, hey, I want to do this, and then they figure out like what are the steps to achieve that result. Because the producer is like the director of the film. They decide, okay, we want to do this shot to get this effect, and they may have a say in like how the actors say their lines and that kind of stuff. So yeah, there was a lot of decision making to be made when I realized I was going to be producing this one. But I think with the time spent with putting together the demo recordings, because we must have done like 4 or 5 rounds of this in the amount of time, because the pandemic lockdowns weren't ending anytime soon until really like later in 2021, where it became safer to meet in person. By that time we were all like vaccinated and boosted.
Right.
uh, but yeah, this gave us a lot of time to keep going back and changing things and getting them where we wanted to. And then by the time it came to recording, it was pretty straightforward. Like, okay, we know this part goes here, this part goes here, and I could just direct people and say, okay, yeah, that's good. We got what we need here. Now let's go on to this part.
Okay. So would you would you credit any of the producers you worked with before as far as, so and so taught me a lot about this or that?
Absolutely. I learned so much from the first two albums with Matt Noveski. He's the bassist of Blue October, and I met him. I think I actually met him. I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, it was in 2010. My mom was shopping in Nordstrom, and being the chatty person that she is, was talking to his wife and mentioning me and how I like to do music. And so I met him through chance, and then had him help me with the first two Aaron Clift experiment albums, because I was pretty new to, I wasn't new to being in a rock band or writing music, but I was new to doing like a progressive rock album. And progressive rock's really a tough nut to crack. I always tell people this, that it's, I guess the reason I'd say that is it's very non-standard. You know, there's, when you think about a style of music like blues or funk or jazz or things like that, you can get into subgenres and it's like there are certain tropes where you're like, yeah, this is a typical like jazz lick, or here's how you'd play a 12 bar blues. So there's
Mhm.
certain things that are kind of codified and standardized. Not to say that you can't do anything different, but it's a starting point. With progressive rock, there's not really an easy starting point for any of this stuff, and it's very specific though, like with the audience members, that they do kind of expect to hear a certain thing, but at the same time it's like you can't just mimic what's come before you, or then you get accused of copying. So it's very challenging in that way, and I think working with Matt taught me a lot about how to think about all these pieces go together. How do you achieve a certain kind of sound that you have in your head, and putting that down?
Okay, yeah, that's yeah, that's why I like Prague. It's what you just described. It's so diverse, eclectic, whatever you want to call it. Um, Not your standard verse, chorus, chorus, whatever. Yeah, very more akin to classical music, I think, in many ways. It's a lot of some of it anyway.
Yeah,
As far as
definitely. I definitely feel that with the music. It's people are always asking the question online, like, what is prog, or the such and such? Is that really prog, or is that
yeah, yeah,
I kind of like I kind of dance around the issue. I'm more of the mind of like the bigger question that I want to ask is it interesting? Is it good? Do I like
yeah,
it?
yep,
For me, because I got my start listening to classical music, but then like uh, the first music that I really got into on my own was grunge, and uh, it's debatable whether any of that is necessarily considered like progressive or not, but I think it is. I think all those groups were doing stuff that was pretty unusual when you think about it, like Soundgarden, Alice in
yeah,
Chains, Smashing Pumpkins
yep.
were all super adventurous, and I love that sound. And I guess I'm just curious about a lot of different things, so I like to incorporate that into the music.
How about STP? You didn't mention them. Did you like
Oh yeah,
STP?
I can't forget about them. I love Stone Temple Pilots. They're a huge influence on me, and they're one of the reasons I wanted to get into music in the first place.
Yeah, I love Scott Weiland. It's a shame that he's no longer with us. Yeah,
Yeah, that's unfortunately, like I'm thinking about a lot of those bands
yeah.
that so many of those
Alice in
talented
Chains,
musicians are
yeah.
no longer with us. Yeah.
Chris Cornell, yeah. Sad but true. So I'll throw you a curveball. How's married life? You did get married,
Yeah, good
didn't you?
one. You know, my wife and I are going to be celebrating our 5 year
Is it 5 years?
anniversary
Really?
this year. Yeah, I know,
I
time
thought it was.
flies.
I thought it was, or did you maybe renew it or something? I don't know. I thought it was more recent than that.
We've been together for longer than that, but yeah, we've been together married now for almost 5 years, and it's
Wow.
I I dedicated the song "If All Goes Wrong" from our previous album to her, because she complained that I never wrote any songs about her. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah.
uh, specifically, "If All Goes Wrong," that you're there for me to help me. With you know, with married life, I'd say we both support each other. We're both creative people. She's a photographer, and so we I think both being creative people and having that urge to do new things and try new things out. She understands like how I get really obsessed with certain things, and
Yeah.
how I need time to like record and do all this stuff. Like we get each other, and you know, she spends a lot of time in the office. Sometimes she does these big photo shoots with food, and then I have to clear out and go in the other room. But we help each other out with those things.
You make space for each other, and it's time to be together as well.
Yeah,
That's
and
what
honestly,
to do.
I learn a lot of stuff from her, especially in when it comes to like social media marketing. Like I learned a lot about how to do some graphic work just from watching what she had been doing or finding out about sites that she was using, and
Yeah.
it's been great. It's helped the band out too.
All right. So, off the record now, I'm going to say I pretty much got pretty much plenty to work with here.
Awesome.
Um, obviously, I'll be thinking of playing the age of misinformation. Probably the flight. What's
Color of Flight.
Color Flight? Yeah. The big band sounding one. We talked at length about that.
Yeah,
You
we
know,
can
to show
talk
some
about.
diversity. Yeah.
That'd be great.
Anything else you would recommend?
Yeah, I would say you could also end with the standard question of like where can people find you?
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, uh, where can people find you? Obviously, I'll have links whenever I post the show, but go ahead and give us a rundown.
Yeah, so our website is aaronclift.com. That's AARONCLIFT.com. And on the website you can learn more about our new album. We've It's also the only place where we've got the merchandise items for this album. So in addition to being able to order CD from our site, you get the CD plus download combo. You can get a digital download if you prefer that. We also have posters for Bet on Zero. So the artwork on the poster that we had our album artist Fumihito Sugawara. He did a special artwork for the single Bet on Zero, and we have some 12 by 18 posters that he has autographed and numbered, so they're limited edition. We also have Bet on Zero playing cards. So since the
Hmm.
song is about a guy with a gambling problem, I thought
Yeah.
not to encourage it or anything, play responsibly, but the artwork for Bet on Zero is on the backs of the cards, so you have a unique playing card deck. Uh, I always love cool merchandise items from the bands that I listen to. So if you want to get those, please do check out our website. And Anthony, I want to thank you again for this interview. It's really great to catch up with you.
Yeah, likewise. And yeah, good album. We'll definitely be playing quite a bit off of it for the program here. And oh, one other thing, think you could do me a little promo.
Yeah, what would
This
you
is
like to
Aaron
hear?
Clift of the Aaron Clift. Just and you're listening to Prog Watch. That's
And do you want a Prog Watch on whatever channel on? Do you want me to say on Progzilla Radio?
you could, yeah.
Okay,
I can,
sure.
yeah.
All right, here we go. Hi, this is Aaron from the Aaron Clift Experiment, and you're listening to Prog Watch on Progzilla Radio.
Cool. Yep. So yeah, unless you had anything else.
No, I think we're good. This is going to give you plenty to work with. So
yeah,
after
I'll
this is
definitely use.
over,
Yeah,
I'll
I'll use a
send
lot
you
of it. Yeah.
I'll send you a WeTransfer email so you can
Okay.
download the audio, and then feel free to edit however you need to. And
Yeah.
then after you've aired, or I guess shortly before you air your show, if
Yeah.
you'll send me the final audio, then I'll upload it once you've aired everything, and we can go from there.
Yeah, I'll definitely get in touch when when it's coming up, and let you know, and send along the artwork for the episode and everything. I do a little bit of we were talking about the graphics and stuff. I make a little piece of art for every episode, little
Yeah.
unique thing on
If you need any of that,
Photoshop.
you have the press website link.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yep.
if you
I got
go under the album download, I think there's artwork downloads you can get there too.
Yeah, so we'll make something nice, and I'll let you know when it's ready. Probably about 2, maybe more like 3 weeks. I work ahead in case I get COVID again or something.
Goodness. Well, I hope you stay safe. Here
Yeah,
I have a.
I got a booster today because I had it. I actually caught it last summer, and
Uh-huh.
I want to tell you, it kicked my ass. I hadn't been that sick in 30 years.
Wow.
So my doctor said, "Oh, if you had it, you're probably good. For it's like your natural immunity." But it's going around again. And me and my wife we saw the one pharmacy where we go. It said walk-ins welcome. I'm like, let's do it, right? So we did it today.
Yep, I've been boosted like twice at this point, so I'm
Yeah,
ready. But
I don't want it again. Don't
yeah,
want it
yeah,
again.
stay safe. Here's a
Me
question
too.
for you. In 2 to 3
Yeah.
weeks, will your beard be any longer?
Yeah. This is I started this with COVID,
Oh,
and where I
nice.
work, it's just a thing. It's it's and my wife doesn't like it, so it's kind of after 30 some years. Uh, you'll find out.
She's stuck with you now. All right.
Yeah, pretty much.
Awesome.
It
Well,
is
on
what it
that
is.
on that note, I'm gonna get back to my wife now. But thank you so
All right,
much, and I'll talk to you soon.
all right, man. Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.